Tonight, a Thanksgiving promise to tackle grocery prices.
And it's so expensive.
You're having to make decisions and what you can buy.
From discounts to price freezes, is it enough to make a difference? And is it enough for a government under attack? At Issue breaks it down. She called 911 in a panic, but was left feeling helpless.
That woman played with my life. I've never been so emotionally destroyed.
And what's behind the new dressing room rules for minor hockey players?
I understand that we can no longer get naked in the dressing rooms. You have to wear a bottom layer.
This is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. Just as many Canadians are stocking up and shelling out for expensive Thanksgiving groceries, the federal government is trying to send a message. Relief is in sight to lower those pricey bills. Ottawa is promising shoppers will soon see discounts, price matching, and price freezes after demanding Canada's major grocers find a way to stabilize food prices. But the plan is light on details. The Liberals say it's all still a work in progress, but as Ashley Burke shows us, critics counter there just isn't enough progress when it's so badly needed.
Thanksgiving this year for many involves tough choices.
Expensive.
On a regular day, you're having to make decisions and what you can buy.
Yeah, you just really buy the essentials.
Hey everyone.
After frustration rose and poll numbers dropped, the Liberals vowed to take on the issue.
You already see action in terms of different grocers adjusting ahead, obviously, of Thanksgiving.
Will you lower prices? Will you lower prices?
Last month, the government called the CEOs of Canada's 5 biggest grocery chains to Ottawa and gave them an ultimatum. Come up with a plan by Thanksgiving to stabilize food prices or else face potential new taxes.
Every day is a good day to fight for Canadians.
Now the industry minister says initial commitments are coming in.
Starting soon, Canadians will be able to see rollout of actions such as discount across a basket of food products, price freezes, and price matching campaigns, to name a few.
The details kept secret. The industry minister says he alone knows each competitor's plans to stabilize food inflation.
We've been engaged in doing everything that we can to contain it. And obviously the minister sort of exhorted us to do more. And I think, everybody had a sort of renewed focus over the last couple of weeks.
The Conservatives also renewing focus on it during question period, blaming the Liberals for the price of turkey.
I found a butterball for him, Mr. Speaker, $30.
Order. The picture of the turkey during the Conservative years was a big, plump, beautiful bird, whereas right now it's a skimpy, shrimpy little thing that looks like it's been taxed to death. Mr. Speaker, why won't they get off the back of the turkey so that we can have a nice dinner for Thanksgiving?
This is not a joke, Mr. Speaker. Canadians expect action. That's what we've taken this morning with a 5-item action plan.
That plan includes a new hub to gather data, changes to the Competition Act, and a new grocery store code of conduct.
We had a government whose poll numbers were getting worse, who are getting significantly hit on the concept of affordability, and came up with, frankly, what feels a bit to me like hand waving to say, look, things are getting better in a time when they're getting better anyway.
Ashley, so I gather the government isn't releasing each company's specific proposal to protect fair competition, but what are those companies saying?
Well, Adrian, Walmart is the first to share publicly what it proposed, maintaining a series of pantry staples for 97 cents and offering Thanksgiving dinner for a price that it says is lower than last year. The government is launching a new task force to monitor grocery store prices monthly and says that if chains don't follow through, they could still impose taxes.
All right, Ashley Burke in Ottawa. From affordable groceries to housing, the Prime Minister is promising $59 million to fast-track construction in one of Canada's fastest-growing cities.
Today's agreement with the City of Vaughan will help us fast-track the building of thousands of homes in the coming years.
Vaughan, Ontario, just north of Toronto, is the second city to tap the government's $4 billion accelerator fund, which is aimed at jump-starting housing construction. This comes on the heels of a report showing that the rate of home building is basically flat so far in 2023. And if you exclude Toronto and Vancouver, it actually slowed down. For those who do own homes, different problems are piling up. Interest rates are surging, meaning so are those mortgage costs. And Philippe de Montigny shows us some can no longer cover the interest, let alone pay down the principal.
La balance, le paiement.
Michael Girard-Courty has a variable rate mortgage for his duplex. Because of his fixed payments, the portion going to interest ballooned. Last month, he only paid $23 towards the principal and more than $1,100 in interest.
I wasn't happy when I saw that. At first, I thought it was actually a mistake.
The time it will take to pay off his mortgage nearly doubled, from 25 to 47 years. He worries another rate hike would push him into what's called negative amortization, a situation where his monthly payment isn't enough to cover all of the interest owed, meaning his mortgage would actually grow month after month.
Instead of paying it off, well, I'm gonna get just in more debt.
This is already the case for about 20% of residential mortgages at three big banks, TD, BMO, and CIBC. These negatively amortizing loans amount to more than $128 billion.
It shouldn't be allowed. I know that most lenders in this situation, what they do is they increase your payment.
The three banks tell CBC News their clients can refinance their loan, pay out a lump sum, or increase their monthly payments, but many can't afford it.
It's an alarming situation considering the times that we're in right now.
Canada's Superintendent of Financial Institutions says $250 billion worth of mortgages have had their amortization period extended beyond 35 years.
I think both banks, financial institutions, and borrowers would be better off if the prevalence of this product was less.
The bank regulator plans to crack down on negatively amortizing loans to rein in the risk faced by lenders and their clients. It plans to update its rules and guidelines later this month. Philippe de Montigny, CBC News, Toronto.
There's been some sharp words and some ridicule tonight for the former Speaker of the House of Commons. Vladimir Putin called him an idiot in response to a question about Parliament's standing ovation for a veteran with Nazi ties. Briar Stewart now with Canada's response.
The Parliament of Canada.
It was only a matter of time before Russia's president weighed in.
Fighting on the side of the Nazi forces.
Vladimir Putin is, of course, referring to this. When MPs gave a standing ovation to Yaroslav Hunka, a Ukrainian Second World War veteran honored in front of Ukraine's president. Before it emerged, Hunka fought for a Nazi-affiliated unit.
I must step down.
The incident led to the speaker's resignation. And now ridicule from a leader who claims he isn't waging war in Ukraine, but trying to denazify it.
If he really didn't know that Hitler was fighting against Russia during that war, then he's an idiot.
Putin made the remarks after being asked by a Canadian professor in the audience to give his thoughts on the Hunka incident.
President Putin.
Radhika Desai is with the University of Manitoba.
Are we forgetting that Russia was an ally of ours in the Second World War?
She told CBC News she had to submit her question beforehand, but wanted to raise the issue because she thinks history is being overlooked.
We have convinced ourselves that, that basically everything Russian is bad.
Convincing.
And while Putin spoke at the forum, rescuers in Ukraine searched through the rubble of a missile attack on a cafe southeast of Kharkiv that left dozens dead, one of the deadliest attacks since Russia's invasion.
Russia right now, even as we speak, is killing the brave people of Ukraine. And we need to push back against everything that Vladimir Putin says and does.
Canada's Deputy Prime Minister condemned that attack and urged people to not let Putin use the Hunka affair to help justify his war. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
An Iranian teenager is in a coma after what activists say was a confrontation with Iran's morality police. CCTV footage appears to show 16-year-old Armita Garavand without a headscarf. She enters a train with friends, and then seconds later, they help drag her limp body out. Officials say she hit her head after a fainting spell. No footage from inside the train has been released. This comes just over a year after 22-year-old Masa Amini died while in police custody. That triggered months of protests. In the UK, there are calls for a formal inquiry into the death of a Sikh activist. He died just days before Hardeep Singh Nijjar was gunned down in BC, a killing Canada has accused India of orchestrating. Chris Brown now with why some believe there may be a connection.
Transfer folder. This is one of the UK TV stations from where Avtar Singh Kanda's friends say he waged his fight, advocating powerfully in favor of an independent Sikh homeland.
Everybody that knew him just found it quite amusing that Kanda is being called a terrorist, an explosive expert, and nobody believed that. He was just a guy that used to be on TV, that used to advocate for Khalistan.
The 35-year-old died suddenly after a short illness, but many here are wondering if someone who didn't like his message might have actually killed him. Friends say Kanda began feeling ill on Sunday, June the 11th. He died in a Birmingham hospital that Thursday. 3 days later in Canada, Hardeep Singh Nijjar was gunned down. Nijjar was also an advocate for Sikh independence. Canada has alleged India's government may have played a role in his death. After Kanda's funeral, some people here began suspecting a connection.
He was made enemy of the state.
Kanda's friend Jazz Singh believes Indian authorities were furious that he took part in a protest outside of India's High Commission in London. Kanda's official cause of death was blood clots brought on by leukemia, but Singh doesn't believe it.
Whether he was physically poisoned before he went to hospital, whether he was given some kind of clotting agent, or whether something was given to expedite his deterioration and ultimate demise.
This Birmingham temple openly supports Sikh independence, with so-called martyrs for the cause on the walls. Here, the idea that activists might be targeted by India's government doesn't seem far-fetched. This is you.
Yeah, this is me, yeah.
Kulwant Singh Motada says he's on a supposed hit list reported by Indian TV and drawn up by the country's intelligence services.
I don't know what I put my name in the Indian intelligence in the hit list yet.
Indian media has reported on other hit lists, one with Kanda's face on it, now crossed off.
Inquests in the UK
That should be more than enough to trigger a formal inquiry, says this lawyer who's representing Kanda's family.
When you put everything together, how can you say there's no reasonable suspicion?
Police in Birmingham concluded there were no suspicious circumstances in Kanda's death, but England's chief coroner will have to decide if it merits another look. Chris Brown, CBC News, Birmingham.
Back in Toronto, the city's integrity commissioner says former Mayor John Tory broke ethics rules multiple times, all of this related to an affair with a staffer. Tory ultimately resigned because of that affair in February. The commissioner found the relationship was consensual, but that certain HR policies weren't followed. He also found Tory acted improperly after that staffer left by voting on issues related to Maple Leaf Sports and entertainment, where the woman was then working. Tory has apologized. An Ottawa woman says she was left emotionally destroyed after calling 911 during an attempted break-in at her home. She says the call taker was judgmental and disrespectful. CBC News obtained a recording of that call. Nicole Williams now with what it reveals.
Okay, why are you crying, ma'am?
Because somebody's trying to open my door.
Was your door locked?
Even months later, Maria Saburan says it's difficult to listen to the call she made to 911 as someone tried to break into her apartment, yelling, banging, and picking at the lock.
They're trying to open my door.
What are they doing, ma'am? I've asked you a question, okay? Can you hear me?
Oh my God, can you send somebody, please?
And can you answer my questions, please? What exactly are they doing?
Saburan says the operator kept asking her questions, interrupting her, and it took nearly 5 minutes before she was told police were on their way.
All I ask is, are you sending somebody or do I have to deal with it? You are not understanding.
Okay, and I'm trying to explain, ma'am, but you keep cutting me off and yelling. So if you can take a second to listen, I'll explain to you how 911 works.
Eventually, Saburan hung up out of frustration and hid in the bathroom with a kitchen knife. Police showed up nearly 2 hours later. The person was gone.
That woman played with my life. And I've never been so emotional, destroyed.
She believes her treatment was because of her accent and where she lives, Ottawa Community Housing.
She was judging me. That's what I felt. I felt judged. I felt my life didn't matter. That's what I was told at that moment.
Experts say part of a 911 operator's job is to get the information, but also to de-escalate a stressful situation.
Be kind of a voice of calm in a moment in which a person is having probably the worst day of their lives because they're calling 911 for what they feel like is an emergency.
Saburan has filed formal complaints against the Ottawa police and is demanding an apology. The force wouldn't comment because the complaint process is ongoing. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Ottawa.
Minor hockey players have some mixed feelings about a change in the dressing room.
And I don't know if it's necessarily sanitary to wear a bathing suit in the shower.
The new orders to cover up. As the world marks another grim record, we see firsthand the alarming state of one glacier.
We really are at a point at which we need to act.
I can't get over you.
And a bus driver catches Drake's attention.
They sent me Drake's story and I didn't think it was real.
We're back in 2.
Just hold on, we're going home.
Torrential rain in northeast India caused a glacial lake to burst. About a dozen bridges were washed away in flash flooding, making it hard to rescue those caught in the torrent. At least 18 people have been killed. Dozens more are missing. Now, data has confirmed that the world just went through the hottest September on record. What's alarming climate scientists isn't just that September broke the record, it blasted past it. Susan Ormiston explains the dangerous implications for the future.
Struggling to smother the deadly impacts of wildfires, this time in Albania, spurred on by parched soil and dry winds. As data confirms, September broke another global record. Copernicus, a climate monitoring agency, shows temperatures off a 30-year average every September, and all the red is above average, and this September, a red spike.
It's half a degree hotter than the previous hottest September. So to break a record by half a degree from the nearest month is a huge amount.
2023 is on track to bust through a heat ceiling marked by extreme fires, floods, and heat. The data only underscoring the human costs.
It's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. Feels like a new ferocious phase. It feels to me like we don't understand this very well. I feel like the climate system has a lot of surprises in store for us, and I don't think they're going to be pleasant surprises.
What's driving it? Ocean temperatures, which started rising early spring, have stayed warm. Wildfires unleashed more carbon dioxide emissions, and that's on top of the high levels of fossil fuel emissions driving up temperatures. And El Nino, a powerful weather system, is adding warmth.
It's huge. It's a super-sized El Nino.
Canada echoes the global trend.
Hudson Bay is about 4 or 5 degrees warmer than normal. Up in the Beaufort Sea, it's almost 3 degrees warmer than normal. In the Pacific and the Atlantic, and how the oceans go, so goes the kind of season you're headed to.
Crunching the data on the climate crisis is part of a strategy to move towards more meaningful targets to bring down the heat.
I would like to believe that we're at an inflection point. We've been like the proverbial frog in the boiling pot of water, and we haven't really started moving out of that danger in earnest. That's what we have to do now.
In face of predictions that 2024 could top records today.
So, Susan, we're obviously experiencing these extremes, but there's also a lot of data coming out very quickly, and it leaves you with the sense that there is something else, driving the pace of these reports.
You're right, politics. I mean, we're at a very critical time in the climate calendar. There's this big COP conference next month in Dubai, and climate scientists and activists are really worried about governments pulling back on their commitments and their targets on renewables and other things. And so they want to keep this kind of data and the images from this summer and now this fall front and center to apply pressure. And that's why this is coming out.
All right, good to know. Susan Ormiston, thank you.
Welcome.
Now, a team of Canadian scientists is studying whether smoke from all those wildfires this summer is speeding up how fast glaciers are melting. They're collecting data at Place Glacier, an ice field that's quickly disappearing in southwestern BC near Pemberton. Camille Vernet traveled there with those researchers to see firsthand what's happening.
Dropped on a massive ice field, this team of scientists are here to better predict how fast glaciers are melting.
We have literally jumped off a cliff. We are finding that the melt is far exceeding in some cases what we had expected.
Like many others, Place Glacier is a glacier that's dying.
Over time, this material has just been accumulating at this surface. Most of it is likely sediment and rock. This surface is just getting darker and darker.
This darkening of the surface is the focus of his research.
Scanning, and that's good. We can characterize surfaces, see if it's like a clean ice or a dirty ice, or you can also use that to see how much light is absorbed and then how much it transfers into melt.
A thin layer of smoke blankets the sky.
How does that wildfire smoke affect both the surface properties, and in some cases people have also considered how the wildfire smoke can change the amount of sunlight coming through the atmosphere. So in some cases, if it's really dense smoke, it reduces that energy coming in from the sun.
There's still a lot of unknowns that the team is working to figure out. But what's clear is that the surface is darkening.
And as we start to darken these surfaces, we start to accelerate the melt from these glaciers.
Glaciers act as a natural water reservoir, storing huge amounts of fresh water. Every degree of warming is critical for their survival.
0.5. We really are at a point at which we need to act. We need to rapidly mitigate greenhouse gas emissions.
He wants people to understand the impact of our actions on Western Canada's glaciers. Camille Vernet, CBC News, Place Glacier near Pemberton.
Minor hockey players are being told to stay covered up in the dressing room.
We can no longer get naked in the dressing rooms. We have to wear a bottom layer.
Why officials hope it brings about some positive change. And Rosie's here with that issue. Hello, you.
Hey, Adrian, tonight we're going to talk about the brewing battle over gender identity politics.
I am going to continue to work to bring people together and to make sure our kids are protected while standing up for everyone's rights.
How might this issue play out politically, and why are politicians using it? Chantal, Althea, and Andrew join me to talk about that and more.
A new rule is now in effect in minor hockey dressing rooms across Canada. There's no more undressing completely, not even to shower. Kayla Hounsell explains why.
It is Canada's game, but not always, not for everyone. Now a new policy aimed at making hockey more inclusive.
I understand that we can no longer get naked in the dressing rooms. We have to wear a bottom layer.
Hockey Canada's new dressing room policy states that all minor hockey players should wear shorts, t-shirts, or sports bras at all times. Until now, players have had the option of stripping down to change in and out of their gear.
I don't think it affects me in any way, but I have to think about the people around me and how they feel, so.
LGBTQ advocates say it's a significant step forward.
I think the concept of belonging really is a big, huge development factor. We see that, especially with young youth, that they are leaving sports because they aren't feeling comfortable.
The hope is to level the playing field when it comes to gender identity, religious beliefs, and body image concerns. But the policy is intended to help everyone.
We have girls that may want to go into a dressing room with boys, and up to this time, they've had to be in their own room, so they're not really part of the team per se.
The new policy also applies to showering. When using open concept showers like these, athletes are encouraged to use a private bathroom first to change out of their base layer and into swimwear before getting in.
I understand, but at the same time, I think it's a little silly. And I don't know if it's necessarily sanitary to wear a bathing suit in the shower.
Some are concerned about inconvenience. Others point out during the COVID-19 pandemic, players were required to show up fully dressed.
Lots of adaptations, and we rolled with it, and we rose to it.
And advocates say understanding the intent behind this move will lead to even more progress.
Go out, work hard, have fun.
Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Dartmouth.
Now it's time for the breakdown. Tonight, how governments are dealing with the cost of food in grocery stores and the battle over pronoun policies in schools. Rosie's here with that issue.
At issue this week, the politics of gender identity. After a court paused his government's policy on pronouns in schools, Scott Moe became the latest Conservative premier to frame the issue as one of parental rights.
We will be introducing and passing the legislation, notwithstanding it, ensure that we are including our parents in our child's life, our child's education across the province.
The Prime Minister says this is about standing up for the rights of everyone.
We will always stand against hatred and intolerance wherever and from whoever it comes.
Canadians are also divided on the issue, so how might the politics play out? I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it down this week. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. Good to see you all this week. Chantal, why do you think this issue has become so popular for, it seems, Conservative governments in provinces anyway? Saskatchewan, New Brunswick certainly came up in the Manitoba election.
And in all cases, and the hopes that it would raise fortunes for the government in place. And that is how it started in New Brunswick. Yeah. It divided the Progressive Conservative caucus. Not so clear in Saskatchewan. But what has become clear over the past few weeks is that there is a serious lobbying for this. It's a mixed bag of people. It is a provincial issue, by and large, that is encroaching on federal jurisdiction, but what has also become clear, and that's why federal politicians should be interested or should run away, is that if you want to enforce parental rights on the issue of gender identity over and above the rights of children, you will have to use the notwithstanding clause of the Constitution. And clear, you'll have to suspend the rights of children to accommodate parents.
Andrew, is it worth the politics here? Like in terms of who the premiers are trying to talk to and which groups they're trying to talk to, is it worth engaging in this battle?
It may be in terms of mobilizing your base, but if you're concerned about more than just your base, it's really a double-edged sword. There's real risks involved. That goes double if you're talking about getting involved federally. I seem to recall Pierre Poilievre saying to the Prime Minister, butt out of a provincial matter, and he might be well advised to take his own advice on this. Not sure why he'd want to risk it. First of all, he's 15 points ahead in the polls. Why rock the boat? But also, you know, you can look at polls and say that a certain proportion of parents agree with this kind of legislation, particularly parents in religious and conservative religious and ethnic groups. And Conservatives have been tempted by this before. I remember back to the days of the fight over gay marriage. And Conservatives thought this was going to really work for them amongst these groups. And it didn't. And I think the reason may be that people, while they might support them on that particular issue, in a broader context, hear a melody in there of, if you're not comfortable with diversity in this case, maybe you're not comfortable with my kind of diversity either. So I think Conservatives should be really wary, leaving aside the merits of the case and what is the right thing to do. Just from a purely political standpoint, I think they should be really careful.
My Radcan colleagues had a story that we also published in English this week saying that this is a struggle inside the federal Conservative Party, where to sort of stand on some of these issues for many of those reasons there. Althea, your thoughts?
Yes, because some of them believe it will be advantageous for a number of reasons, some of which my colleagues have identified. Reaching out to ethnic communities, especially in the suburbs around Toronto, around Vancouver, voters at the Conservatives don't already have. It's a great mobilizer for their own base in terms of getting volunteers to go knock on doors. It's an issue, frankly, that they think that they can trap the Liberals federally on and progressive alternatives provincially on in terms of getting them to overreact and then to be seen to be offside with public opinion. And I don't know that they're necessarily wrong about that. I would like to believe that we won't be waging the next federal election on the backs of, vulnerable children and using them as a wedge issue. But I think the lesson in Manitoba's election earlier this week is that, frankly, this might be an issue that people say in polls that they care about. But when you rank what issue you actually care about, what you're most concerned about, it's like real world issues. It's healthcare, it's affordability. And these are the things that allowed Wabkanu to win. Not just that, but it also comes with a really big risk, which I think is worth noting, which is that, if you're willing to do this, what else are you willing to do? And Mr. Poilievre struggles with being seen as mean, and I think that could echo the niqab, the tip line from 2015. So there are risks, and we saw what the risks were with the PC party in Manitoba. And so, yes, there are benefits, but at the moment, it kind of seems like the risks outweigh the benefits, and the Conservatives federally don't need to go down this road.
Chantal.
Outweigh the risks big time for two reasons. Provinces will come to different views on this issue. BC, Manitoba, Quebec will likely not come down on the same side as the New Brunswick and Saskatchewan. So if you're a government that says, or a party that says we respect federal, provincial jurisdictions, you have no business in this debate. But the other issue is, if you do feel that you should come down on the side of governments that want to intervene in this debate at the provincial level, then you are basically saying you're okay with suspending people's rights to enforce it. And once you open that door federally, you're basically saying the federal Conservatives would be open to using the notwithstanding clause for other rights. And you're opening up a can of worms that they've tried for years to get rid of, as in abortion rights, same-sex marriage. And then why would you intervene in the Supreme Court in the matter of Quebec's secularism law if you think it's okay for provinces to use the notwithstanding clause to overwrite the rights of kids? So bottom line, this is, I think, a lose-lose for any federal party that goes out in support of provinces that are going down that lane.
But you do see the government, the Liberals, Andrew, taking a very strong position. Now, the Justice Minister said he was going to watch things and consider next moves and stuff with the notwithstanding clause, but certainly the Prime Minister's rhetoric on this has been very forceful. So, I wonder at what point that plays into the so-called culture wars that people might be trying to create, manufacture, or whatever.
Well, I think it was Althea said that the Conservatives are hoping to bait the Liberals. I think the Liberals may be hoping to bait the Conservatives. And I think there's more risk for the Conservatives on this, particularly for Pierre Poilievre. The bargain I think he has made with the public that's got him to where he is so far is, I may be hard-edged, I may be brash, but what you see is what you get. You're not going to get any surprises. And in particular, I'm not particularly interested in social issues, in social conservatism. The social values, I think, that really work for Conservatives amongst immigrant groups is things like hard work, thrift, entrepreneurship, things that are tied more to their core economic message. And I think they'd be much more advised to be focusing on those issues if they're trying to make inroads than in these kinds of much riskier strategies with real potential downside for them.
And certainly that seems to be what they're doing, their tack right now. Last word to you, Althea, about 30, 40 seconds.
Well, I think the notwithstanding clause for every party, you have to be ideologically consistent with what you oppose. And so it is tricky for the Conservatives to say, or as Pierre Poilievre had originally said, that he would intervene with Bill 21, although the people around him appear to be ideologically, in favor of a notwithstanding clause, and so would be backing Premier Moe's point of view. But we've seen the Conservatives federally, the Quebec MPs, backtrack from that original thought. So I think it's quite possible that we will have a very vivid clash of view between the Conservatives and the Liberals on the use of the notwithstanding clause, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. I do think, though, to Andrew's point on, like ethnic minority communities, that values question, which was there in the defense of Bill 21, is a little there on the parental rights issue, and especially those motions that were passed at the Conservative Convention. And back to my point about Pierre Poilievre doesn't need to go there.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to say anything because his volunteers can point to the Conservative policy book and say, see, this is what we believe in. Our values are aligned with your values. He doesn't actually need to verbalize it from his pulpit as Conservative leader. I'm not saying I agree with this, but I'm saying he doesn't need to go as far as perhaps some people would like him to.
Okay, I got to leave it there. I suspect we'll probably talk about these issues again. But when we come back, we're going to take a look at how the government is responding to grocery prices.
Grocers need to compete to meet the expectation of Canadians across the country. And that's really what you're going to see.
At issue. Back to break that down right after this. The government promised it could get grocery stores to present plans to stabilize food prices. Today, it says that has begun.
These measures will bring a much-needed, more competitive marketplace, and the winners of that are obviously Canadians.
Ottawa says that will include discounts, price freezing, and price matching, and says additional action will be taken if needed. So is the government doing enough to help Canadians and to blunt political attacks? Chantal, Andrew, and Althea back to talk about this. We don't see these measures yet, right, on terms of stabilizing prices or even lowering prices. I guess we'll see in the days and weeks ahead whether there's something there and whether the competitive market that the minister wants is actually going to listen to him. But I guess my first question, Andrew, is will it work? Do we really think that the government threatening potential tax on these guys is actually going to do anything?
No, this is showboating. This is what governments that are at 26% in the polls and dependent on the NDP to stay in power, it's the kind of stunt they engage in. The last thing we need is to have prices in a market economy set by a combination of job owning by the industry minister and meetings behind closed doors of chief executives. I think you have to distinguish between high prices and rising prices. Prices for groceries may be too high. There may be issues, and have been pointed to by studies in the past about the level of competition in the industry. So from a standpoint of bringing prices down over time, I'm all in favor of anything that encourages competition. And of course, the first thing they could do would be to dismantle supply management, which is one of the chief offenders. But that's different from rising prices, which is what we're dealing with right now, which has nothing to do with either of those things. Those things were present even when prices were much lower than they are now. We have rising prices. The information I've seen suggests mostly to do with things to do with farm products and farm inputs, things like gasoline and fertilizer, though, that skyrocketed up, apparently are now falling, and we may well see prices start to fall in the grocery business in the next few weeks anyway, but which would be conveniently timed to follow this showboating by the minister.
Okay, Althea, your view.
I don't know if it's going to have an impact or not. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like the government is not treating us like adults in this discussion. They could tell us that, a lot of the prices that you see at the grocery store are actually determined by the market. They could talk about the fact that the war in Ukraine has had a huge impact. They could talk about supply chains. But I guess people don't want to hear that, and they want an easy answer. I think there are some things the government has suggested that are not necessarily bad, like they're not bad. I think the Competition Act changes in Bill C-56 are good. Will they result in lower prices? I don't know. The other thing that we never talk about is like having 5 big grocery stores doesn't just mean that consumers pay more. It also means that suppliers may actually get less money than they otherwise would because they're being squeezed out by people that have a very heavy hand to play and can determine whether or not you get to sell your product. So I'm not sure if some of the changes that Mr. Champagne has suggested will make as big of a difference. But I will say that the politics of this are interesting. This week we had the Conservatives drill the government down every day on, as Andrew has kind of suggested, is kind of a stupid promise that they made to lower prices for Thanksgiving. But they went so far in making their point. And Mr. Poilievre talked about a turkey that was $120. I don't know where he's buying his turkey, but I have looked at Metro, and there's turkey there for like between $17 and $35. So, You know, it just kind of hurts their argument, I find, when they exaggerate, because when they need people to trust them, they will wonder whether or not what they're saying is trustworthy. So it would be nice if all of this rhetoric could kind of tone down a little.
There are some other measures they announced today in terms of, you know, gathering data and having a better sense of prices and stuff that you could see could be, it could be useful. Chantal, either whether you think it'll work, but also whether it's working politically, which is I think part of the goal here.
Well, I guess a fig leaf is always better than having to say the emperor is naked. So on that basis, yeah, politically, great idea. That being said, I can't wait to see how they figure out what the average grocery basket is supposed to be in every region of the country. 2 hours north of Montreal, it's a lot harder to get cheap tomatoes than it is in Montreal. So good luck with that. I think the Liberals are basically singing or dancing to the Conservative and the NDP tune. And maybe that is good politics. Whether that will yield results, I suspect most Canadians will not believe that if they pay a little less for turkey, they will owe it to Justin Trudeau or to Pierre Poilievre. And at some point, how far, and I say this as someone who believes that the state has a positive role in the economy and in Canadian life, but how far do we go in the granny state that I have to worry about the answer to the question, how much is a can of peas going to cost for Thanksgiving?
Andrew, I bet you want to weigh in there.
As bad and foolish as this sort of stunt appears to me, I have to say, people should stay tuned. I think the Liberals are going to make an aggressive push on these affordability measures, even though they were late to the game, and it's hurt them obviously badly. An incumbent government has a lot of opportunity to set the agenda and to pull rabbits out of its hat and to bring forward policies, well-advised or ill-advised. And so, you know, the 15-point gap that we're seeing in the polls now may be the trough for the Liberals, that never underestimate the ability of governments to set the agenda.
Well, we didn't even talk about the Prime Minister, the housing accelerator announcement in Vaughan. If he does, you know, 2 cities a week, that looks like the government's at least trying to solve the housing problem. Sorry, Althea, you wanted in there.
Well, I was just going to say, especially when there is an enemy that you can galvanize people around, right? So for the Conservatives and the NDP, that might be the Liberals, but the Liberals might decide to make big grocers that convenient enemy.
Yeah, well, that only works until people who actually produce food in this country are starting to say that the grocery stores are starving them to please the Liberals. And at that point, it backfires. So it's not that easy. Not everything we buy actually comes from some other country, and big grocers are responsible for the price of it. I don't see this as something that is going to bear, to make a bad pun, great fruits for the Liberals.
Okay, but it has reminded me to thaw my turkey and get on that. So I'm that'll be my takeaway from it all. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. I'll see you next week. And with that, I'll throw things back to Adrian in Toronto.
All right, thanks, Rosie. Next, a Toronto bus driver belts out a tune and goes viral.
So just hold on, we're going home.
How Drake gave him the ultimate seal of approval in our moment. So it's no secret Drake supports all things Toronto. Of course he does. He was spotted shopping in a vintage Toronto Transit jacket earlier this year, but his love for the TTC went even further. The megastar shared a video of a Toronto bus driver covering one of his songs, and he shared that video to his 143 million followers. The driver's reaction is our moment.
You should let me drive you. Let me be the one to get you to the place you need to be.
So about a year ago, I was not feeling like myself, and it was determined that maybe I should kind of incorporate more of my passions into my everyday life. And one of those passions is singing.
So just hold on, we're going home.
And then I thought, you know, how cool would it be if a TTC driver in Toronto was doing the bus that, you know, goes through what's known as the jungle and is singing the song Jungle by Drake. And I did it, I made it.
The things I can't change are the reasons you love me.
And I got a bunch of DMs and a bunch of comments on that TikTok saying, you know, oh my goodness, Drake posted you. People saying, check out Drake's story. They sent me Drake's story, and I didn't think it was real. And I looked, and it was him. And he had posted it, and I immediately called my wife. She was getting the kids ready for school and getting ready for work, and I said, stop what you're doing. I don't care if they miss the bus. You have to go, and you got to check out Drake's story right now. And just, you know, the scream that came through the phone at 8 o'clock in the morning was pretty intense.
Just hold on, we're going home, home.
So John's socials are blowing up, as they do, and lots of people who are writing to him are saying, you know what, Drake should probably pull John on stage this weekend for his tour, for the It's All a Blur tour, which is a great idea, because, I mean, then that will make everybody happy, and it will then be the moment here on Monday. So give it a shot, Drake. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime, on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.